Bianca Amato stood behind Adrian Vale, her fingers moving fast over the collar of his shirt. The bow tie was crooked. His jacket sat wrong on his shoulders. She pulled the fabric straight, smoothed it down, and laughed softly at something he said. "You're the only person in this building who can make a tuxedo behave," Adrian said, watching her in the mirror. "Marry me." "I already have a job," Bianca said. "A very demanding one." Neither of them saw the man standing at the door. Gabriele Conti did not knock. He never announced himself. He simply appeared, the way he always did, silent as smoke, and what he saw stopped him cold. His secretary. Laughing. Her hands on another man's chest, fixing his collar like she'd done it 100 times before. Adrian Vale, comfortable, smiling, leaning slightly toward her as if the space between them belonged to him. Gabrielle felt something twist inside his chest. It was sharp and sudden and completely unfamiliar. He did not like it. He did not understand it. And most of all, he refused to name it. He cleared his throat. "Am I interrupting?" Bianca spun around, her hand still resting on Adrian's shoulder for one more second before she dropped it. The moment she saw Gabrielle's face, she knew something had changed. His eyes were calm, the way they always were before he said something dangerous. His jaw was tight. "Not at all," Adrian said easily, turning to face him. "Your secretary has skilled hands. This tie was fighting me." "I noticed," Gabrielle said. His voice was flat, controlled. A blade wrapped in silk. Bianca had worked for Gabriele Conti for 2 years. In that time she had learned things about him that almost no one else knew. She knew he took his espresso with exactly 1 sugar cube, though he pretended he took it black in front of clients. She knew he hated small talk but loved long silences, the kind most people found terrifying. She knew that beneath the reputation that made grown men go quiet when he entered a room, there was a man who was funny in the driest, most unexpected way, a man who noticed everything and said nothing until the perfect moment. She was not afraid of him. Not anymore. She argued with him about scheduling. She teased him when he was too serious. She had, on more than one occasion, stolen his coffee off his desk simply because he annoyed her, and watched him pretend not to notice while quietly ordering a second cup. Somewhere in those 2 years, without either of them deciding it, she had become the person he looked for the moment he walked into a room. Neither of them called it anything. To him she was his secretary. Brilliant, efficient, impossible to rattle. To her, he was simply the impossible man she happened to work for. A man who terrified strangers and made her laugh until her stomach hurt. But right now, standing in her office with Adrian Vale's jacket still half-buttoned and Gabrielle's eyes fixed on her like he was trying to solve a puzzle, none of that felt simple at all. "The car is ready downstairs, Mr. Vale," Gabrielle said, not looking away from Bianca. "You'll want to hurry. The event starts in 20 minutes. Right?" Adrian buttoned the last button himself, glancing between the two of them with the faint curiosity of a man who had just noticed something interesting. "Thank you, Bianca. Truly." "Anytime," she said. Adrian left. The door clicked shut. For a long moment, Gabrielle said nothing. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, studying her the way he studied contracts before signing them, looking for something hidden in the fine print. "Was there something you needed, sir?" Bianca asked, using the word sir the way she always did when she wanted to remind him she wasn't afraid of his silences. "No," Gabrielle said. He turned and walked out. Bianca stood alone in her office, her heart beating strangely fast, and told herself it meant nothing. He was simply protective of his business partners. He was simply particular about punctuality. He was simply Gabriele Conti, and Gabriele Conti did not get jealous. She almost believed it. 3 floors below, in the back of his car, Gabrielle stared out the window at the city lights and asked himself the one question he had never had to ask before. Why did watching another man stand that close to her make him want to put his fist through the wall? He had no answer. He only knew that from this evening forward, nothing about his secretary would feel simple again. By morning, Gabriele Conti told himself he had imagined the whole thing. He walked into the office the way he always did, calm and unreadable, and found Bianca already at her desk, sorting through his messages with the quiet efficiency that made her irreplaceable. She glanced up. "Adrian Vale called," she said. "Twice. He wants to take you to lunch to discuss the merger." "Fine. He also asked for my number." Gabrielle stopped walking. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. "Why would he need your number?" Gabrielle asked, his voice carefully even. "Because he's charming and charming men ask for numbers," Bianca said, not looking up from her screen. It's practically a hobby for men like him. Did you give it to him? Now she looked up. There was something in his tone she hadn't heard before, something tight and careful, like a man walking on a floor he didn't trust. No, she said slowly. I told him I don't mix business with personal numbers. Something in Gabrielle's shoulders relaxed, just slightly, just enough that Bianca noticed. Good, he said. Keep it that way. I don't need my secretary distracted. Distracted, she repeated, folding her arms. Is that what we're calling it? Calling what? Nothing. She smiled, the small private smile she used when she caught him at something and decided not to say so directly. I'll let Mr. Vale know you're free for lunch on Thursday. Gabrielle walked into his office and shut the door harder than necessary. He spent the rest of the morning reviewing contracts he could not focus on. Numbers blurred. Words repeated themselves. Twice he caught himself staring at the wall instead of the page, thinking about the way Adrian Vale had smiled at Bianca in the mirror, comfortable and easy, the way Gabrielle had never learned to be with anyone. He had built an empire out of control. He decided things. He fixed things. He never wanted things he couldn't have, because wanting was weakness and weakness got men killed in his world. But somewhere between the coffee she stole and the arguments she started just to see him lose his composure, he had started wanting something he had no right to want. At noon, she knocked and stepped inside with a folder of documents, and something out of habit made him ask before he could stop himself, "Where were you at 7 this morning?" Bianca blinked. At home. Getting my brother ready for his physical therapy appointment. Why? Gabrielle hesitated. He hadn't known that. He knew almost everything about the people around him, but Bianca had never once mentioned a brother. No reason, he said. Just wondering why you were 15 minutes late. I wasn't late. I was exactly on time. You just arrived early because you couldn't sleep, and don't ask me how I know that. He almost smiled. Almost. I sleep fine. You drink coffee at 6 in the morning like a man who hasn't slept in a week. That's not sleeping fine. That's surviving. Careful, Gabrielle said. You're starting to sound like you care. I care about my paycheck, Bianca said, setting the folder on his desk. You're much less pleasant to work for when you're tired. She turned to leave. He watched her go, and the thing in his chest twisted again, the same sharp, unfamiliar pull from the night before, except now it had a name he refused to say out loud. He wanted to ask about the brother. He wanted to ask what she wasn't telling him, because 2 years of reading people had taught him that Bianca Amato, for all her sharp comebacks and steady hands, was very good at hiding things behind a closed door. He said nothing. Instead, he watched her walk out and told himself for the second time in 2 days that it meant nothing at all. He was getting worse at believing it. Matteo Amato had always been the stubborn one. Even now, a year after the accident that left his right arm slow and weak, he refused most help. He would rather spend 10 minutes struggling with a button than let his older sister do it for him. Bianca understood the pride behind it. She simply loved him too much to leave him alone with it every single time. You're going to be late, she said, watching him wrestle with his shirt cuff in their grandmother's kitchen. I'm fine, Matteo muttered. You've said that for 2 minutes while attacking a button like it insulted you. He shot her a look but let her step in and finish it for him. That was how it always went. He fought first, accepted help second, and never once said thank you out loud, though his eyes usually did. Their grandmother, Nana Amato, watched from the stove, stirring a pot of coffee with the same wooden spoon she'd used for 30 years. You look tired, Cara, she said to Bianca. I'm fine, Nana. You say that as much as your brother does. It means the same thing when you say it. Bianca didn't answer. She kissed her grandmother's cheek, told Matteo to text her after his appointment, and left for work with her mind already circling back to the office, back to Gabrielle Conti and the strange, careful way he'd looked at her the day before, like a man studying a threat he couldn't quite identify. She had a rule when she took the job 2 years ago. Learn what you need to learn and leave before it becomes personal. She had broken that rule months ago, somewhere between his terrible bedside manner and the ridiculous, dry jokes he made when he thought no one was paying attention. She still hadn't told him the truth about why she'd applied for the position in the first place. At the office, Gabrielle was already unbearable. You're 7 minutes late, he said the moment she walked in. I was 7 minutes early yesterday and you didn't say a word. I noticed. You noticed I was early or you noticed I was late? Both, he said, which was somehow worse. She dropped her bag at her desk and studied him. He looked exhausted, the kind of exhausted that came from thinking too hard about something he didn't want to think about. You're doing the thing again, she said. What thing? The thing where you stare at nothing and pretend you're reading a contract. Gabrielle set the folder down. Adrian Vale is coming for lunch in an hour. I need the merger figures ready. I already sent them to your email. Send them again. They haven't changed since 10 minutes ago. Send them again, he repeated, and there was something almost boyish in his stubbornness that made her want to laugh. You're jealous of Adrian Vale, Bianca said, testing the words out loud for the first time, watching his face carefully. I don't get jealous. That wasn't a denial. That was a deflection. I've read enough of your contracts to know the difference. Gabrielle's jaw tightened. I have no reason to be jealous of a man asking my secretary for her number. So you admit that's what this is about? I admit nothing. You just did, Bianca said, grabbing her tablet with a satisfied little smile. I'll go get the lunch reservation confirmed. Try not to glare at Mr. Vale through the whole meal. It's bad for business. She left before he could argue further, and Gabrielle sat alone in his office, staring at the door she'd just walked through, thinking that somewhere along the way, this woman had learned to see straight through every wall he'd ever built. It should have worried him more than it did. The restaurant was the kind of place where every table felt like it belonged to someone important. Gabrielle sat across from Adrian Vale, half listening to numbers about shipping routes and profit margins, while Bianca sat beside him taking notes she barely needed to take. Adrian was in good form. Charming, relaxed, generous with his compliments, most of them aimed at Bianca. You should let me steal her for an afternoon, Adrian said, smiling. I could use someone this organized on my own team. She's not for sale, Gabrielle said, his tone light but his eyes anything but. Everything's negotiable, Adrian said, still smiling. Not this. Bianca kept her eyes on her notepad, fighting a smile of her own. Across the restaurant, a woman in a sharp red dress watched the table with quiet interest. Livia Sarno had known Gabrielle for years, long enough to want the merger between their companies, and long enough to want more than that from him. She had never managed to hold his attention for longer than a business meeting. Now, watching the way his gaze kept drifting to his secretary instead of his lunch, she understood why. Interesting, Livia murmured to the man across from her. Renzo Costa, an old rival from Gabrielle's past life, followed her gaze. Interesting how? Gabrielle Conti doesn't get distracted, Livia said. Not by numbers. Not by threats. Apparently, he gets distracted by his secretary. Renzo's smile was slow and cold. That could be useful information. For what? Every powerful man has one weakness he doesn't know he has yet, Renzo said. I make it my business to find them before he does. Livia said nothing, but she filed the thought away carefully, the way she filed away everything that might one day be worth something. Back at their table, lunch continued without either Gabrielle or Bianca noticing they were being watched. You've barely touched your food, Bianca said quietly while Adrian took a call outside. I'm not hungry. You're never not hungry. You once ate an entire plate of pasta during a hostile negotiation. That was different. How was that different? That negotiation didn't involve a man asking to steal my secretary for an afternoon. Bianca set down her pen. Gabrielle. It was the first time in 2 years she had called him by his first name in the office, and it landed somewhere in his chest he wasn't prepared for. What? He asked, quieter now. You have nothing to worry about, she said. Adrian is charming. He's also not you. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The noise of the restaurant faded into the background, and Gabrielle looked at her the way he hadn't let himself look at anyone in years, open and unguarded and slightly terrified of what he was feeling. I don't know what that means, he said carefully. I think you do, Bianca said. You're just too stubborn to say it. Adrian returned before either of them could say more, apologizing for the call, and the moment folded itself back into business, into numbers and polite laughter, but something between them had shifted, quiet and undeniable. That evening, Gabrielle stayed at the office long after Bianca had gone home. He sat at his desk with her words circling in his mind, you have nothing to worry about, and for the first time in a long time, he let himself imagine what it might feel like to actually believe her. He did not yet know that across town, Renzo Costa had already begun asking questions about a woman named Bianca Amato, questions that would eventually pull her whole hidden past into the light. For now, Gabrielle only knew one thing for certain. He was in far deeper than he had ever intended to be, and there was no clean way out of it anymore. Renzo Costa was patient. He had learned patience the hard way in a life where rushing things got people killed. So when he began asking about Bianca Amato, he did it quietly, one careful question at a time, the way a man pulls a single thread to see how much of the sweater comes with it. It didn't take long. 3 years ago, a man named Salvatore Amato had died in a warehouse fire that investigators ruled accidental. Salvatore Amato was Bianca's father. And the warehouse at the time had belonged to a company 2 steps removed from Gabriele Conti's organization. Bianca had never believed the fire was an accident. For years she had heard whispers, half-finished conversations, a name here and there, and every path seemed to circle back toward Gabriele Conti's world. When a position opened in his office 2 years ago, she had taken it for one reason only. She wanted to know the truth about her father's death. She had spent months quietly watching, listening, waiting for some sign that Gabriele had been involved. She never found one. What she found instead was a man far more careful and far more honest in his business than the rumors suggested. A man who had, in fact, personally ordered an investigation into that same warehouse fire years earlier and shut down the supplier responsible for the unsafe wiring that caused it, though he never told anyone that either. She had learned the truth. Gabriele had nothing to do with her father's death. If anything, he had already tried quietly to make it right. She should have told him everything the day she found out. Instead, she stayed silent, because by then she wasn't working for him to find answers anymore. She was working for him because she didn't want to leave. Renzo, of course, did not care about any of that nuance. He only cared about the shape of the story he could tell. His secretary's father died in a fire connected to his old operations, Renzo said to Livia over drinks. And she took a job in his office 2 years later. That's not a coincidence. That's an investigation. You think she's working against him? I think Gabriele Conti will believe she was, the moment he hears it, Renzo said. And a man who feels betrayed makes mistakes. Mistakes I can use before this merger closes. Livia turned her glass slowly on the table. Part of her hesitated. She had wanted Gabrielle's attention for years, but even she understood there was a difference between winning someone and watching someone get hurt to clear your path. Do what you want, she said finally. I won't be the one who tells him. You won't have to be, Renzo said, smiling. I already have someone lined up for that. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at Gabrielle's office. No return address. Inside was a single page, a copy of an old fire investigation report, and a short handwritten note. Ask your secretary why she really took the job. Gabriele read it twice. Then a third time. His hands, usually so steady, were not steady now. He thought about every quiet moment over the last 2 years. The questions she never quite finished answering. The way she changed the subject whenever old company records came up. The brother she'd never mentioned until last week. The careful, guarded parts of her he had always assumed were just part of who she was. He wanted to believe there was an explanation. He wanted, more than he had wanted anything in years, for this note to be a lie. But Gabriele Conti had built his entire life on reading people correctly, and for the first time he was terrified he had read the most important person in it completely wrong. When Bianca walked into his office that afternoon, cheerful, carrying his coffee the way she always did, she found him standing by the window with the letter in his hand and an expression on his face she had never seen before. Gabrielle, she said softly. What's wrong? He turned to face her, and the silence between them said more than either of them was ready to hear. Is it true? Gabrielle asked, holding the letter out to her. Bianca took it, and the moment she saw the fire report, the color left her face. Where did you get this? That doesn't matter right now. Answer the question. She set her cup down carefully, buying herself a second to think, though there was nothing left to think about. The truth was already standing between them, plain and undeniable. My father died in that fire, she said quietly. I took this job because I wanted to know if your organization was responsible. Gabrielle said nothing. His face had gone very still, the way it always did before he made a decision that could not be undone. I found out you weren't, Bianca continued, her voice steadier now, though her hands were shaking. I found out you shut down the supplier responsible for the wiring before I even started working here. You tried to fix it. You never told anyone. When did you find that out? 8 months ago. 8 months, Gabrielle repeated. You've known for 8 months that I had nothing to do with it, and you said nothing. I didn't know how to bring it up without telling you the real reason I took the job in the first place. So instead you let me believe you were exactly who you said you were. My secretary. Nothing more. That's not fair. Isn't it? His voice was quiet, and that quiet was worse than if he'd shouted. I've spent 2 years telling myself I could trust you completely. I let you closer than I've let anyone in a decade. And this entire time, there was a version of the story you decided I didn't need to hear. I was afraid, Bianca said, her eyes stinging now. I was afraid that if I told you the truth, you'd think everything between us was part of some plan. It wasn't. None of what happened between us was ever part of any plan. How am I supposed to know that? Because I'm telling you. You told me a lot of things, Gabrielle said. Apparently not all of them were true. The words landed harder than either of them expected. Bianca flinched, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Gabrielle turned back toward the window, his jaw tight, his hands pressed flat against the sill like he needed something solid to hold onto. I could make this go away, he said finally. I could bury that letter, find whoever sent it, and make sure this never becomes a problem for either of us. That's not what I need from you. I know, he said. That's exactly the problem. I don't know what you need from me anymore. Bianca waited, hoping he would say something else, hoping he would turn around and tell her it didn't matter, that they could work through it together the way they'd worked through everything else. Instead, he stood very still, and when he finally spoke again, his voice had lost its edge entirely. You should take some time, he said. Away from the office. Away from me. Gabrielle? I'm not punishing you, he said, turning to face her at last. His eyes were tired, not angry, and somehow that was worse. I understand why you did what you did. Your father is dead and you wanted answers. I would have done the same thing in your place. Then why? Because I need to know if what's between us is real, he said. And you need to figure out if you're staying because you want to, or because you feel like you owe me an apology you can't fully pay off. I won't have you here out of guilt. Bianca felt her chest tighten. So you're letting me go. I'm giving you a choice, Gabrielle said quietly. For the first time in my life, I'm giving someone I care about an actual choice instead of deciding it for them. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him she didn't need time, that she already knew what she wanted. But the look on his face told her this wasn't a moment for arguing. She picked up her bag and without another word she left his office, walked out of the building and did not look back, though every part of her wanted to. Gabrielle stood alone by the window long after she was gone, and for the first time in years, the silence he had always been so comfortable with felt unbearably loud. 3 weeks passed and the office was quieter without her in it. Gabrielle had hired a temporary assistant, a capable young man who did everything correctly and annoyed him for reasons he refused to examine too closely. The coffee never went missing. No one teased him about staring at contracts he wasn't reading. No one called him by his first name in a tone that made the whole room feel smaller and warmer at once. He told himself this was what control looked like. Order. Silence. No complications. He hated every part of it. Bianca spent those 3 weeks at her grandmother's kitchen table, helping Matteo with his exercises, drinking too much coffee, and trying to convince herself she had done the right thing by walking away without a fight. You could call him, Nana Amato said one evening, setting a plate down in front of her. He asked me to figure out what I wanted. And have you? Bianca looked down at her hands. I wanted him before any of this happened. I want him now. That part was never the confusing part. Then what are you waiting for? I don't want to go back because I feel guilty, Bianca said. I want to go back because it's real. I needed to be sure the second one was true, not just the first. Nana Amato smiled, the knowing smile of a woman who had lived long enough to recognize love even when the people carrying it were too stubborn to see it themselves. Kara, she said gently, you have been sure since the day you started stealing his coffee. Bianca laughed for the first time in weeks, and something inside her finally settled into place. The next morning, she walked into Gabrielle's office without an appointment, without a phone call, and without the careful excuse she had been rehearsing the entire drive over. He looked up from his desk and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. You're not supposed to be here, he said finally, though there was no real weight behind it. I know. Did you figure out what you wanted? Yes, Bianca said. I wanted to tell you the truth, the whole truth this time. My father's death is part of why I came into your life. It is not why I stayed. I stayed because somewhere along the way, this impossible, difficult, ridiculously stubborn man became the person I wanted to come home to every single day. Gabrielle stood slowly, coming around the desk to stand in front of her. I let you go because I needed to know the same thing about myself, he said. Whether I wanted you here because it was convenient or because I couldn't imagine this office, this life, without you in it. And? There's no version of my life that works without you in it anymore, he said quietly. I tried. It was unbearable. Bianca smiled, her eyes bright. So what now? Now, Gabrielle said, reaching for her hand, you come back. Not as my secretary. As the person I should have admitted I loved a long time ago. She stepped closer, and for the first time, There was nothing careful or guarded about the way he looked at her. "So," she said, tilting her head, a familiar teasing light returning to her eyes, "are you still jealous of Adrian?" Gabrielle considered the question with the same seriousness he gave every contract that crossed his desk. "Always," he said. Bianca laughed, and for once, the most feared man in the city smiled first. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us what you loved most. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep bringing you heartfelt stories like this one. We'll see you in the next story.